Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 208. Today I'm going to talk about Freedom, the Underground Railroad. It's designed by Brian Mayer, published by Academy Games, plays 1 to 4 players, and it's basically, like the box cover says, you are trying to get slaves out of the South during the late 1800s in the United States and try to get them through what they call the Underground Railroad, trying to sneak them up, help them escape from their plantations, get them through to the north, and then again on up into Canada. So again, it's a cooperative game. You can play it solitaire. It has a lot of sort of historical flavor and things like that. It's sort of a very difficult subject, I think, to tackle. I don't think I've ever seen a board game tackle a historical subject quite like this. Board games often typically will have a war game about World War II, even the Civil War and different things like that, but this is very specifically a human rights type of issue and a political issue. And so it's a very interesting topic and a very interesting treatment. So let's take a look at how the game is actually going to work, and I'll give you my thoughts on it afterwards. Okay, as you can see, it's quite a large board. We've got a map of the eastern United States. We've got the south here, up into Canada over on that side. We've got the different plantations down here. These little cubes are what is representing the slaves. And then we've got sort of a political track here with some different tokens and cards, and some cards that you can purchase over on this side of the board. So the game objective is basically twofold. One is to escape as many slaves here from the plantations up into Canada as dictated by the card up there. So we've got 4 cards for the different player counts. And so we've got, if you're playing single player, you basically goal is to free 5 slaves, and then you don't want to lose more than 12. And there's also a more difficult side here to free 7 slaves and only lose 8. And you can see here we've got, with 4 players, you want to free 22 slaves and you don't want to lose more than 20. And again, you have the more difficult side there. So you just pick however many players you are and then set the card up there on the top of the map. Now the second goal that you must achieve in the game is to purchase these support tokens up at the top here. And these are going to be laid out based on the number of players. There's a couple other things that you're going to set up in terms of the amount of tokens here, as well as the cards down here. You're going to set those up based on the little charts here for the different numbers of players. So the second thing you have to do, in addition to escaping the number of slaves, is have purchased all of these support tokens. And this kind of shows the support for the abolitionist movement, in Congress and getting the Emancipation Proclamation passed. So you've got twofold. One, you're trying to sort of physically, get the slaves out of harm's way, and then also, make some political, change in the country as a whole there. So after setting up the board, the tokens, and all the different cards based on the number of players, you're going to choose a different role here. So you can see we've got a station master, a preacher, a shepherd, an agent, a stockholder, and a conductor. So there's 6 roles, and then each of these roles has a, sort of a turn breakdown, which is nice. Then you can see you've got a spot for a roll card and a reserve card. So you're going to take the matching roll card here, and it's going to give you some special abilities. So if you look here on the top of these cards, you're going to have a special ability that you can basically do each turn, and then you're going to have another special ability that you can do once per game. After you do that, you'll flip this over, and then you'll no longer have that bottom special ability. And then sometimes this top special ability will change a little bit after you've used that main ability. So you're going to choose that, then determine player order and give first player this lantern. This is going to move around turn by turn, and then you're ready to start the game. Well, the first thing you're always going to do is you're going to roll for these slave catchers. So if we look out here, we've got these different colored symbols up here on the board, and these represent different slave catchers that are moving around the north and into the south a little bit. And these guys are trying to basically steal back the slaves and send them back into the plantations. So the first thing you're going to do is roll these dice here, and you can see here, okay, so this says to move the brown square, which we have up here, and then it's also going to move a certain direction here. So you've got white arrows and black arrows, and sometimes they'll move multiple arrows. Now sometimes you can roll this sort of traveling icon here, and that basically means none of the slave catchers will move. So if you look here on the board, you can see the different paths that match the different slave catcher icons. So we've got this purple oval here, and then we've got this blue sort of pentagon there. And so based on what types of arrows you rolled, you can see that the purple oval is going to move this way, when the white arrows are rolled, and then if the black ones are rolled, then you're going to move the other way. So they're all going to kind of move around, and you kind of get to know the paths. And this is kind of a big part of the game, I'll explain a little bit more later on, is how these things sort of work together. So after rolling for movement of the slave catchers, then you're going to go into the planning phase. So the planning phase basically is each player is going to get 2 of these tokens. So you're going to start with $8 in the game and possibly accrue money throughout the game. And you can purchase basically these top 2 rows here for money. So you can see these cost $10, these cost $2, and then these sort of go up in cost. And then you have this token down here. These are actually going to be free. These will help you raise some money. Now at the start of the game, you can only purchase things from this column here. Now once you have purchased the 2 support tokens, or however many support tokens were in that first column, then that basically means you've activated this second row. And then you can purchase from both of these. And once you purchase from the second one, then you activate the third one, and you can start to grab some of these stronger different tokens there. So basically you're going to talk amongst yourselves and decide who's going to get what, who's going to be responsible for doing the different actions. So basically what these middle row of tokens are going to do is let you, when we get into the action phase, move a certain number of cubes that many spaces. So we can move 3 of the slave cubes 1 space in this case, or we can move 2 different ones 2 spaces and stuff like that. So these are actually going to allow you to raise money, which we'll talk about more. But in the planning phase, you're going to decide who's going to purchase what, and everybody can get 2 tokens in this phase. So after the planning phase, where you're going to get some tokens, then you can start taking your actions. You can play tokens like this to move the different cubes along the board. You can also purchase cards here. So you can see these, if we zoom in here, you've got 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. So you can purchase these cards here, and then sometimes you can take and put these in reserve. You can have 1 card in reserve, or most of these though are sort of immediate effects. So I can take this one. You can see this one says move 1 slave from a large northern city to Canada. And so these cards also are going to get replenished at the end of the turn, and based on which column you've activated, because remember, once you pick up those support tokens, then you're going to activate these columns. So these are broken down into years. Once we activate that second column, then we're going to start pulling cards out of here and then out of here. So the dynamics of the cards are going to change a little bit sort of as history progresses here. Now while we're talking about the cards, just one quick thing to note. There are these sort of opposition cards, and these are in red. And these are negative here. So what this one says is up to 3 slaves in spaces next to slave catchers are captured. Resolve when removed. So at the end of the round, we're going to remove off the rightmost cards here. And so if we fail to purchase this, you can see that you can actually purchase one for $2, and that basically will stave off this negative effect. Otherwise, it's going to eventually move over to the right as the rounds go by, and then trigger, and then this nasty effect is going to happen. Now, not all of them work like that. Some of them actually will just cause you harm just by them existing in the row, and it doesn't even let you purchase the card to get rid of it. It's just going to sit there and give you problems as it sort of persists. So there's some interesting historical flavor woven through these cards, especially these opposition cards. You can kind of get a sense of, the things that were hindering the efforts of the abolitionists and things like that. So, you basically have to sort of deal with these extraneous forces that are, really making the environment difficult to work to free these slaves. So in addition to playing your tokens and possibly buying cards, again, you can play the different effects of your rolls. But during the action phase, a lot of your interactions with the game are going to be on this board, and this has got some intricate pieces to it. So let's talk a little bit about moving the slaves and how the slave catchers will actually react to the movements of the cubes in the game. So as you start to move these slaves up into these different spaces, you may actually trigger some of the slave catchers. So you can see I move this slave here, and it's adjacent to the yellow triangle's sort of path here. So if the yellow triangle had moved down here on a previous turn, and then I had moved this slave into here and ended his movement there, then that's immediately going to trigger him to come 1 space closer, like so. But it also is very possible that I could have somebody kind of coming up an alternate route, and then maybe he moves into here, and then this will trigger him to go backwards, and then also that kind of frees the guys from moving up this way. And so there's sort of a little bit of back and forth in terms of trying to maneuver the slaves up through here. Now it's very difficult, and you definitely are going to lose slaves as these catchers hit them. So if the guy was here and the slave catcher comes here, he's actually going to capture him, and then he's going to go back into the market, which I'll show you in just a second. So as you move up, you are going to be triggering. You can see the different icons and shapes and things. And so these guys are going to be moving around, and it really is a sort of nice chunky puzzle that you're going to have to sort of collaborate with, and in some ways send decoys up, unfortunately, to get captured. So that's a kind of interesting mechanism there, and this sort of routing and networking is a huge part of the game. Now it's also going to make you money as well. You can see here that we've got some dollar amounts here. So when a slave moves into here, it's actually going to generate that much money for whoever's turn it was when they were moving. So we've got some different amounts here on the board. Now the other thing to look at is if you look at some of these spots here, these have some southern color codings. These are considered southern cities here. You can see that one there. And then if you look up there, you can see we've got some blue background cities. So in addition to generating money as you move slaves in here, sort of getting donations to the cause, as it were, you can also get these fundraising tokens. And you can see here, these guys here will basically give you $1 for each slave cube that's in the different spots. So if you can kind of fill these up and then play a fundraising cube, you can generate a fair bit of money. And then towards the end of the game, these will actually generate money for any of the cubes that are in the blue background spots. And most of the time you can only have one cube in a spot, which makes things a little bit dicey, especially to try to get them out of the plantations. You want to try to get them out as much as possible. But some of the larger cities and stuff here, you can actually put more than one cube in, which makes it attractive for the slave catchers to hit, but also it lets you free up some of the southern spaces a little bit better. Now, if we look here on the right-hand side of the board, we have these sort of slave market cards here. And so if any slaves that are captured by the slave catcher are actually going to be dispersed here, in addition to, you can see the spots that they come in with. So anytime we flip a new card out here, it's going to come in. It's sort of like a boat or something coming in. But the extra ones that are going to go here are going to come on here. So at the end of the round, we're going to take the bottommost card here. We're going to take all of these, and then we get to choose where they go on the plantations here. So we're trying not to fill this up. We're trying to keep these plantations low on slaves, because if you come in here, let's say we're trying to fill this up here, and we'll put these on the bottom. And so let's say I had this slave here, and there's no more room for him to fit in any of these open slots. Then we're going to go up to here. We're going to go to our little card here, and then that's considered a lost slave. And so any slaves, again, that you cannot put in these bottom spots are going to go into the lost column, so to speak. And then any slaves here that we can move in through these spots up into the north, these are going to count towards the ones that we've actually freed here, and this is where we're trying to get them. We're trying to keep them out of here, because again, as soon as you have to put a slave in this lost card and there's no room, you're immediately going to lose the game. Finally, we're going to discard the rightmost cards. In a 3 and 4 player game, you just discard this one. In a 1 and 2 player game, you'll discard both of the rightmost cards, and then that's it. You're going to always play the game in 8 rounds unless you win beforehand. No matter how many players are in the game, there's going to be 8 cards in the market deck, and the game does actually balance pretty well. So you can see this is a 4-player card here, because this has a ton of slaves inside of here. When you're playing single player and 2 player, these cards won't have quite as many. So the game, I should say, really does scale very well from 1 to 4 players, because you've got a little bit of changes that you're going to do, through the setup to keep the game balanced for the number of players. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. There is a lot that you could really say about this game, and I kind of alluded to it in the intro in terms of the treatment of this sort of historical, event in this time period. First thing I like is the sort of tactical nature of the board. You're trying to sneak out as many of those slaves as you can, but you're going to lose some. And I think that is a good part of the game, because it's not something that I think should be glossed over, is sort of the loss of life and the sort of trauma of this time period and how horrible it was. So I think that's a very interesting thing, is sometimes you do have to sort of sacrifice, 1 cube so these other 2 guys can get away. And, I can definitely see how that sometimes would happen as you're trying to run from these people. And then you also have the political side of it, which is a little bit abstracted in terms of buying those support tokens to sort of unlock those extra columns of better tokens, and then you get sort of the better cards towards the end. And that really gives you sort of a sense of not necessarily the sea change, but sort of the shift in the country's consciousness about this situation here. So that's interesting. And the cards, I have a nice historical reference to them. They got some of the key people. There's a small little historical 2-page deal in the back of the rule book that kind of adds to that. Most of which I'd learned about in school, but it was good to sort of read that and get sort of back into that mind frame. So it's very puzzly as a game. It's very sort of puzzly and definitely a brain burner as far as those routes go and how you're trying to move the slaves, because again, you're going to be triggering the slave catchers. You're going to be triggering sort of fundraising dollars that you're going to need to, again, purchase better tokens or purchase those support tokens to unlock the different columns. So there's some interesting things with that, and also getting some money back to be able to purchase those abolitionist cards that you can use for their special abilities. So there's some cool little kind of like combos that you can do, by your sort of activities on the landscape that translates directly into some of this sort of not necessarily abstract, but sort of ethereal, political, the ideology of it. So you have sort of that physicality of the escape, the definite like pressure and the hide and seek of that, but also tied in nicely with the politics and with sort of the morality and the mindset of the cards, of those people, and all that. That really works well together. The other thing, like I said, it balances really nicely. I'm glad they took, I think, it looks like it's a lot of extra time to make sure that it balances all those player counts. And I think it does work quite well. In addition to sort of the variety of the abolitionist cards, you've also got the variety of roles that are available. So I like that. You've got sort of the different pieces, of the types of folks that were helping. You've got the preachers who were helping and the conductors and, those different people that were all, important into contributing to this sort of movement here. So definitely is a somber subject, and I think it does a nice treatment of it. It's a very sort of historically woven, aspect, and the game is really, very, very difficult, first of all, but it also plays out very nicely, and there definitely is sort of a tension there, and you can feel, all of those aspects coming in, and the game seemed to really go down to the wire in terms of the victory conditions, based on the player count and all that stuff. So definitely I would take a look at this game, and really, I mean, it's an astounding sort of achievement, I think, that a game like this is a fun game. Fun is a relative word, but it is fun because it is exciting to almost try to win and and try to free these folks and all that stuff. So the game works really well, and it definitely keeps you engaged the whole time. But then you have this very very important subject that isn't too far in the past of human history that is given this treatment. Without being too abstracted. I don't think it's abstracted enough so that it removes you from the sort of humanity of it. I think the humanity of it stays keen and it stays relevant with this game. So I think that is a fantastic achievement. So anyway, that's Freedom, the Underground Railroad. Thanks.